Okay, this is Jason with Cycling for Change, and we've had a great lunch at St. Francis Parish in St. Francis, Kansas, and our host for it, Mr. Mike Callicrate, is with us today. So thanks for joining us, Mike.
Absolutely, Jason. Good to have you.
You know, what we're writing about here is to raise awareness about the 40 million Americans that are living at or below the poverty line, and of course, one of the efforts to reduce that is to call people to get involved and be involved in charitable acts. But another aspect too is to promote more just economic policies. And Mike here is a small businessman, cattle rancher, and has been very active in a lot of these economic issues in terms of the public policy aspect. Mike, could you share with us a little bit about what you see as some of the priorities we need to change in this country in order to create more wealth?
Well, Jason, the real fundamental basis of an economy is wealth creation. And the economic policy that we've had for the last 20 or so years has been really around globalization instead of community. As a result of that, we have shipped a lot of our wealth-creating jobs overseas. The manufacturing businesses have left to go overseas. Much of our food now is imported, and as you stand here in St. Francis, Kansas today, you're in a food-producing region. We depend upon our wheat, our corn, our cattle in order to make a living here. But over the last 20 to 30 years, we have received less and less for what we produce because of the market power of big corporations, those Wall Street-based companies that continue to just demand more and more. And as a result, our community has shrunk significantly. Farmers are some of the most impoverished people in the world, and that's hard to figure out because these are the people who are growing our food, yet these make up a large part of those who are hungry in this country, is those people who produce our food. And the big corporations in the middle have got so much market power that it's a lot easier for them to buy commodities cheaper, corn, wheat, cattle, hogs, dairy is another example, than it is for them to sell it higher to retailers like Walmart, King Soopers, Safeway, food service companies like Cisco. And so during this time of what we would call economic prosperity before the crash of 2008, you know, farmers were sitting out here just getting killed and lacking sufficient income to pay their bills. And I'll tell you where a lot of the people who now live in these cities came from is these rural communities. They've been denied a fair living, and they've ended up in the cities where they have just increased the poverty problems in the cities. If you've seen the Marion House, the line at that Marion House has gotten a lot longer in the last couple of years. But prior to that, we'd lost our population already to the city. And what I'd like to see is economic policy that would increase fair markets to where a farmer, who really is the person who does the work, invests the money, and takes the risk, can get his fair share, that he can reap the reward of his efforts. And bring people back to these rural communities, which are wonderful places to live. A lot of people would like to live here if they could make a living. And so that's the economic policy I think we need to see, and that promotes that. And in particular, what we need to do is enforce antitrust laws, so that corporations have to behave in a fair manner. So they can't manipulate prices, they can't rig markets, they can't force our prices down. And the other thing I think we need to do that's really significant is make sure our trading partners are acting fairly. That China isn't manipulating currencies, which they have done now for a very long time. They manipulate their currency at about 40% below ours, giving the Chinese manufacturer a 40% advantage coming into our market. Plus then there's value-added taxes, border taxes, and so forth that they impose on us and we don't impose on them. So it's given them a huge advantage, and what we see that really in the Walmart stores. They've got all this cheap stuff from China, but the problem is it's not made here. So that wealth is not created here. And so we've got to have economic policy that brings back wealth creation. People who make things and people who grow things are so important.
One of the things that you've been very active in is sustainable farming, but and also healthy organic farming. And do you see as, because if you just stated earlier, sort of the evaporation of the small farmer in place of the mega corporate farms, do you see the issue of food safety and food sovereignty as a way of bringing back and helping rejuvenate the small farm?
Absolutely. If we could recognize the importance of being able to feed ourselves. I mean, how fundamental is that? We know from some of our trading partners that were hungry in the last 50 years and realize the importance of being able to feed themselves. They will not allow us to dump our farm production on their markets and put their farmers off the land. They simply aren't going to allow that. But here in this country, we do allow it. We do allow foreign imports to dump on our markets. But the other thing about these imports is they're not produced under the same standards. So, and you know all the problems we've had with Chinese imports, from melamine to lead to drywall to fish to dog food. I mean, all of this stuff, and we're just allowing it into our country. And so as more people become aware of the importance of eating good food and safe food, I think they will probably want to know more about where it comes from. And right now, USDA has got an exciting program going with Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. And it's I think it's a great campaign, and I hope that we can get more people choosing to eat food from people they know. And the fact is, if we can eat food from our community and from our region, it supports so much more economic health in that region as well.
One of the things that I've always heard you say is eating is a moral act. Can you explain that?
Well, eating is a moral act, absolutely. And you know, I think about shopping at Walmart, for example, and you know, if there was something that told you about how that food was produced on your way out of the store, that showed the economic refugees that were paid below living wages that had to produce that, the child labor that had to produce that, the environmental damage that was necessary in order to produce that cheap stuff that you're buying, you could feel the immorality of that. And so when you support cheap food that's not good for you, particularly not good for you and your body, and you know, one of the things that we think about as Catholics is, you know, we should take care of our God-given gift, and that is our body. And for us to eat the kind of food that industrial agriculture is producing is so contrary to our health. And so it is a moral act in many ways, from the way it's produced, from the way that it's transported, from the way that the animals are treated, and from the way that it acts and reacts within our own bodies.
And that's one of the tragedies too, is people who are living at or below the poverty level, that's really all they can afford is a cheap food, knowing that it's not any better for them. It's making them worse.
And I think people have to recognize that the reason we have so many people in poverty is because there has been such tremendous concentration of power and wealth. And this is under the globalization that we've promoted to embrace over the last 20 or 30 years. And as a result of this concentration of power and wealth, it's in few hands, and so many people are now outside of the economic system. And so when we think about economic policy, we need to think about how we bring people into the economic system and make the economic system serve the people instead of the people serving the economic system.
Now, for the folks that are following Cycling for Change, what can they do? How can they get involved to affect some positive change so we can have a more just economic society?
Well, I think in their own community, they need to support people who are in their community. Shop local. Try to do business with people you know, and acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of people outside of this economic system right now that are really, really struggling. They're struggling with hunger, depression, homelessness, and embrace those people. Let's try to help them and try to, within our own communities, to establish policy that's beneficial to our communities. And I really talk a lot about community versus globalization. And it's like Jacek Popiel, a good friend of mine from Colorado Springs, said, you can have globalization or you can have prosperity, but you cannot have both. With globalization, money is concentrated in the hands of a few, which denies the rest of our community, the rest of our population, prosperity.
Well, you know, and a lot of times we do focus, in a lot of works with Catholic Charities, we focus on what are the causes of poverty, but that is another way of looking at things and looking at really the causes of wealth, because if we are going to pull people out of poverty, we need to create wealth. Mike Callicrate, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate that. Any final words you want to share with me?
And thanks for what you're doing too, Jason. And, you know, it reminds me of a nonprofit organization out of California that talks about change, not charity. And so let's not just simply provide charity, because we have to affect change, or we're all going to end up in poverty. So we have to affect change.
I can give an amen to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Follow us at cyclingforchange.org. Thanks a lot.